I spent 5 years making a documentary that pretty much no one will ever see. And sadly, that is not an uncommon story. I want you to learn from my mistakes, so when you make your next documentary, you can make something enjoyable, viewable, and, could you imagine, profitable. Still water. Okay, this must be episode 6, and we're going to talk about crafting your story and talking with talent. So let's talk about all of this, creating your story, being in the story and sculpting it, and working with characters, talent, subjects for documentaries specifically. This reminds me of working on several documentaries, whether it be in camera or DIT or sometimes, producing or production coordinating, whatever it may be. Like, I've been in very many scenarios where I could tell that most documentary filmmakers, directors, and DPs all kind of prescribe to the same thing, which is you can alter things while you're shooting, and obviously especially later. But while you're getting the shot, you're in the story on the day, it is very common for a certain number of things to happen. One, directors very often will say, what if you said it like this? Or, I liked what you said, can you repeat it, but in just a different way? This happens all the time. Directors trying to mold the story as it's happening, or try to get a certain tone as it's happening. Obviously, this could never happen if you were just letting people say what they're going to say and do what they're going to do. This happens very often. It's very normal. It might sound weird hearing it if you haven't been in these scenarios, but it happens all the time, especially with high budget ones. Anything you've seen on streaming, they've been told what to do. I've noticed this with directors and DPs, just because they're kind of one and the same, especially on doc. A lot of the times DPs will kind of take over docs. I've heard this a lot and I've seen it. DPs will come in and they'll kind of hijack the story. And directors sometimes want that, sometimes don't, but it does kind of just happen in terms of the power dynamic, because a lot of the time the DP is closer to these subjects. So they're really pulling the strings. In either scenario, both of these people in these roles will try to make things, especially for streamers and like ultra, dramatic stuff. I'm not doing the quotes again. Everything has to be high stakes. So directors and DPs will very often, from what I've seen, ask for things to be done in a different way again, or make up scenarios. Or some directors, even recently I've heard, they will put people in scenarios and see how they react. So it is a lot of like manipulation. It is a lot of like world building on your own. And it is so much not reacting to the real world. And I hope there's no confusion out there about this, because I would assume most viewers now realize that docs are pretty manufactured at this point. There is obviously a bit of truth in them, but so much less than what used to be kind of just like the truly just rolling camera, and obviously way more boring, and just like things happen or they don't. And that's just the kind of stuff that I used to watch and love, is like behind the scenes of movies, or just like weird documentaries of people running around with their friends. Like, not every moment is going to be like an adrenaline rush, but that has to be that way now. And that's how you keep an audience. And that's just the way it goes. It is just the nature of the beast. I'm not going to comment on whether it's right or wrong. It's just the way it goes. And this is the way things are done now. So do not feel bad if you're interviewing someone and you hear them say something and you got to go, it doesn't quite fit. What if you said this? Because there is that relationship that you are building with characters, subjects, etc. of documentaries. And the earlier this happens and the more often this happens, the better. That you're communicating with them and going, we're trying to do this with the story, right? So like, what if we did this instead? That fits better. Or as you're building it, you go, I could see it kind of going this way. Like, let's say it like this, just in case we end up there. And most of the time, if you're not, purposely trying to make them look bad, or you're not tearing everything down, and they can see that, they will oblige these people that are the subjects of the documentary. So that's just a little tidbit of advice, is from day one, be communicating with them. But again, just like we said a few other times before, this is your story, so do not forget that. So you will have to put your foot down sometimes. You will have to say no. There will need to be a back and forth sometimes, maybe even a few arguments. It's just the way it goes. But that is the fine line that you, as a director or a DP or whatever it may be, you need to be able to walk that, and you need to be able to navigate that properly. Okay, so when you're shaping a story, I have a bunch of things written down. It's good to often recap with subjects. Some directors do this in different ways. Some will literally show subjects or the subject footage from the day before or the week before. And they might even show them a teaser cut. Because, if you're doing things right and you're staying organized and you're getting investment and you're getting resources, you need to be on top of this stuff. So, 6 months to a year in, you might already have a teaser for investors. And it's okay to show that to your subject, as long as it's not obviously provoking them to leave the project. That's obviously something that you need to figure out. And so if you're technically, and this has been done before, if you know that you're telling a different story in the edit, but the way the story is going, you have to make sure the subject feels comfortable and knows that like something is happening, then maybe you make something different for them. And again, that's something you figure out for yourself. But either way, you should be keeping the subject excited, and you should be keeping them informed, whether that be with footage or just your notes, like, hey, this is what I've seen happening. This is what I see happening next. Maybe we can try to do this to bring it there. Like, it's good to have those conversations. Not only is it okay, it's almost mandatory to have these conversations. You don't want your subjects in the dark. You don't want them thinking like, what have they gotten? Like, is it going to make me look bad? Like, what are they trying to do with it? You don't want them thinking too much negative thoughts about this. And ultimately, the easiest way to combat that is just to be open and honest with them. So do that. I think what's nice about this part of the process is if you're building teasers, or if you're, choosing like selects already, and you have some really cool clips, or like this is a funny thing, or like this is a cute thing, or this is them crying, like this is dramatic. It's good to obviously categorize that stuff into different timelines or folders or whatever it may be, so you can always recall it. But it's also important, not for the subjects, but for as you are continuing to build the audience and investors and maybe someone for distribution, or maybe a producer you want to bring on. All of this stuff is helpful for those things, where it's like, if you can show that like this is real, this is important, this is good quality, there's something here that can be viewable and sellable, then it makes your life so much easier along the way. So you're building for different people, but you're still just building the same thing. And it's important to know that it's necessary, and it's very helpful for you and your project. This is a good reminder of what we talked about before. All of this is going to come back to the contracts that you signed with whoever it may be, producer, subject, etc. Yourself, is who owns the property, who has the right of final cut to the story, who's allowed to do what, who's getting paid what. And this will all come back into play potentially multiple times during your project, and of course through the final cut and distribution and thereafter. And that's why it's so important to get the contracts right. Is, as you're talking with the subject and as you're having these conversations, things come up, and you should always be able to refer back to the contracts and to the boundaries, the guardrails that you set, and the expectations that you've set for yourself and for everyone else involved. It's good because people can and will forget that. And it's good to, instead of having to have a personal argument about it, just be like, look, this is what's best for the project. We agreed on this. Like, let's not make it a big deal. That's the kind of stuff you should be able to say, rather than having a full out argument with them and then finally using the contracts as like a weapon against someone. Use it as a mediator through the process of filming and through storytelling and through negotiating. The contract should be the mediation all the way through the project. So I mentioned this before, and it's just good to mention. This is where I kind of went wrong with my main subject of the documentary, was giving them a bit too much leeway, giving them a bit too much of my trust and too much power over the story. That is truly ultimately why I took it from it being about one single thing to a very large portion of the scene and the city and the changes, all that kind of stuff. It could have very easily been about one thing, a person and the group of people, the movement, etc. But it was just so obvious that that wasn't going to happen because there was nothing in place other than an NDA that I couldn't say things about them, which is hilarious to think about. And I will never stop saying that. But also the idea that certain people will want to make sure that something isn't said about them, regardless of whether there's an NDA in place or not. And so there really is that push and pull. And I learned a lot from this person specifically in the documentary. And that's great. And it's just like, that's just the way it goes. But it's something if you can be more mindful about that in the beginning, it's going to be way more helpful to you. And ultimately, it's going to make the story way better. There is a note that I have about re-interviews. This happens a lot normally, but what's really interesting is there were two people specifically that came to me for this documentary and said, can I be re-interviewed? I have something different to say now. I liked that. I did. A lot of the time, documentaries, you'll interview someone multiple times. That's normal, especially if you're working over the course of months, years. You're going to hear from them many different times, and you want to see how they've grown and things have changed. But I guess I didn't realize that maybe the subjects will come to you and say, look, I hope this is okay. I don't like who I was then. I don't like what I said. Can we redo it? And again, for this situation, this is a person that became a friend. I became very close with this person. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. Like, that's the point is, I'm not trying to ruin anyone's life. I'm not trying to expose anyone. It wasn't pivotal to the story that I used their first interview or anything from it. I was able to watch the first interview and be like, okay, what are some things I want to retouch on? But also it was an advantage to me because again, like this wasn't a highly resourced project. I wasn't able to interview everyone multiple times like you normally would if you wanted to. I interviewed everyone once and that was it. That's the time that I had and that's what I did. But for this person and one other person, but for this person specifically, it was, okay, cool. So now I can also add to the story. And so it's been 6 months or more. And now I can be like, okay, well, there's a new narrative. I've got new things. I've got this footage. You can talk about this. And like so many things, had flowered out of the story over the course of a year. And so that was actually very beneficial to me as well. It worked out for both of us. And that's the point. There was a bit of back and forth. There was like, kind of an unspoken negotiation where it's like, well, yes, but why are we doing this? And like, how is it going to be helpful to me in the documentary? And that was all great. And we had a talk and the interview was great. It looked better. It sounded better. It was far better for cuts as well. And that's almost kind of why this certain subject became a larger part of the documentary is so many people in this documentary are very well spoken and they're very deep with what they have to say about the music scene in the city. But this person had evolved over the course of a year and a half, truly. And that was really cool to see. And ultimately, I used way more from the second interview, and I didn't even think about the first interview at the end. So to wrap up, the final note I have, which I'll just, reiterate, is you are going to need to have hard conversations with one or with many people, whether it be subjects of a documentary, side subjects of documents, small roles, legal assistants, lawyers, government officials, whatever it may be. You're going to have hard conversations with them, but don't forget you're going to have hard conversations with your own people, with producers or with your editor or with anyone that is involved with the project. Don't think that this is your safe space. Like anything creative, especially documentary work, especially low paying documentary work, it's intense and there's a lot of emotions and there's a lot of opinions. And that's just the way it goes in general with these kind of things. In film in general is like this. And that's kind of the beauty of it is, we're adults and we're still in a creative field. And so it's that mix of, you know what I'm talking about. Anyways, all that to say, you need to be prepared and you need to learn how to have hard conversations. That needs to become a skill that you have. Is how to have the hard conversations, how to navigate negotiations, and someone who's angry at you, or someone who wants something changed, or someone who wants to just rip the whole thing down. That will happen often in documentary. So learn how to do that. Learn how to speak to people, learn how to be open, learn how to hear them, but also learn how to frame whatever you want in a kind and stern way. And always ask for what you want, and always remember, as we've said a million times now, it is your story. Protect your story and your vision. So for episode 7, what are we going to talk about? Yes. Okay, good. Right, we're close. We're going to talk about finishing up everything that you have, just packaging it together, not looking back, trusting yourself and all these things that you've done, and making something. And that's the fun part, is seeing something come to fruition and seeing something solid, whether it be a teaser, a trailer, to a 10-minute cut, the whole thing, whatever it may be. It's so much fun to just see a story start to come together. So we'll talk about that next week. In the meantime, I hope this was good enough, good information. Reach out if you have any questions. I feel like there was a little bit of me bouncing around for this. So if there's anything that I said that was confusing, give me a comment and we'll go from there. See you next time.